My best friend Rosa and I planned a fun getaway to Chicago for the summer. We wanted to explore the Art Institute, try deep dish pizza, and walk along the shore of Lake Michigan. We searched online for a nice Airbnb close to downtown to easily visit the major attractions. We found a charming loft in a renovated old building. It had exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and large windows that let in a lot of sunlight. The host, Naomi, had a handful of reviews, all positive. The price was reasonable, so we booked it for 4 nights. When we arrived at the loft, everything looked just as described. Naomi wasn't there to greet us, but she gave clear self-check-in instructions. The space had a modern vibe with a cozy couch, a small dining table, and an open kitchen. Rosa and I unpacked, then rushed out to grab dinner and see the famous bean sculpture in Millennium Park. We got back around 9 p.m. and settled in to watch a movie on our laptops. The neighborhood was a bit noisy, a mixture of cars, voices, and city sounds, but we didn't mind. Around 11 p.m., just as we were getting ready for bed, there was a sharp knock on the door. 3 loud knocks, then silence. Rosa and I exchanged confused looks. We weren't expecting anyone. We walked to the door and I asked, "Who is it?" A male voice replied, "Chicago Police. Please open up." My stomach tightened. Why would the police be knocking on our Airbnb? I looked through the peephole. I could see a tall man wearing a dark jacket. He flashed what looked like a badge, but I couldn't see it clearly through the distorted peephole. I kept the chain on the door and opened it just a crack. "Yes?" I asked, trying to steady my shaky voice. He said in a deep tone, "Ma'am, I need to speak with you about a disturbance reported in this unit." That made little sense. We hadn't made any noise or had any problems. I glanced at Rosa, who shook her head in confusion. "Sorry, officer," I said carefully. "We just got here a few hours ago. There's no disturbance." He insisted. "We got a call. Open the door so I can come in and take a look." That was a red flag. I remembered reading somewhere that real police officers usually don't demand to enter without a clear reason, especially if there's no warrant. I asked him for his name and badge number. He rattled off something too quickly for me to catch. My heart pounded as I realized something felt very off. I told him to wait and that I would call the local police station to confirm. He paused for a second, then said, "Don't waste time. Just open the door." That's when I started to panic. Rosa grabbed her phone and called 911. She whispered to the dispatcher that a man claiming to be a police officer was at our door, but we weren't sure if he was real. Meanwhile, the man outside knocked again, harder this time. "Open up," he growled. I told him we were on the phone with 911. His tone changed abruptly. "You're making a big mistake," he snapped. Then he muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. After a brief pause, I heard footsteps fading down the hallway. The 911 operator stayed on the line with us. Within minutes, we heard real sirens outside. 2 uniformed officers knocked on our door in a more controlled manner, announcing they were from the Chicago Police Department. We quickly verified their names through the door before opening it. They were dressed in official uniforms, had marked badges, and looked professional, not like the man who came earlier. One of the officers asked us for a description of the fake cop. We explained what happened: the knock, the fake badge, the sudden aggression. We also mentioned that we were staying in an Airbnb and had no clue if it was a random crime or if we were targeted. The officers took notes and advised us to stay inside and lock the door. They said they would patrol the area to see if they could find someone matching the description. After the real police left, Rosa and I were too shaken to sleep. We kept the lights on and pushed a heavy chair against the door just to feel safer. I texted Naomi, our host, to let her know what had happened. She apologized profusely and said she had never heard of anything like this in her building before. She offered to let us move to a different unit she managed nearby, but we decided to stay put for the night since the actual police had just been there. The next morning we woke up feeling anxious. We called the local precinct to follow up. They hadn't caught anyone, but they told us there had been a few similar incidents reported in the area. Someone posing as an officer to trick people into opening their doors. Sometimes these criminals forced their way in to rob or assault the occupants. Knowing how close we came to danger made my blood run cold. Rosa and I weighed our options. We could cut our trip short or find another place to stay. We reached out to Airbnb, explaining that we felt unsafe. They offered to help us relocate. In the end, we chose to move to a hotel downtown. Even though it cost a bit more, we wanted peace of mind. Before we left, I learned a valuable lesson. Always verify the identity of someone claiming to be a police officer. If something feels wrong, ask for a badge number and a name, and call the station directly to confirm. Real officers will understand your caution. Our dream trip to Chicago turned into a nightmare that first night, all because of a stranger banging on our door pretending to be law enforcement. Even though we still managed to see the city's sights in the following days, we remained on edge. Every time we heard footsteps in the hallway or the slightest knock on a door, our hearts jumped. Now, Rosa and I share this story with anyone who travels. Whether you stay in a hotel, a hostel, or an Airbnb, be alert, keep the doors locked, and don't open them to anybody unless you're sure who's on the other side. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. I had always wanted to visit Seattle. The city's mix of nature and urban life fascinated me, and I couldn't wait to explore Pike Place Market, see the Space Needle, and sip coffee at the original Starbucks. My boyfriend, Jake, and I decided to stay for a week. So we booked a charming Airbnb that was described as a cozy basement apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The photos showed a cute living space, a small kitchen, and a bedroom with a soft-looking bed. The price was good, and the host, Lisa, had several positive reviews saying she was quick to respond and helpful. We flew into Seattle on a Sunday afternoon. Rain drizzled from a gray sky, which felt very on-brand for the city. After grabbing our luggage, we rented a car and headed to the address Lisa had given us. The house stood on a tree-lined street of older cottage-style homes. We found the key in a lockbox just as Lisa had instructed and let ourselves in through the side door that led to the basement apartment. The apartment was a bit smaller than it looked in the photos, but we weren't too fussy. The furniture was mismatched and the lights were dim, but it felt cozy enough for a week-long stay. There was a faint, musty smell, which we figured was normal for a basement. We set our bags down and texted Lisa to let her know we'd arrived safely. She replied with a friendly message, "Welcome. Let me know if you need anything." The first night passed without much excitement. We fell asleep to the sound of rain tapping on the small window. In the morning, we ventured out to explore downtown Seattle. We toured the market, snapped pictures of the gum wall, and tried fresh seafood. We returned in the early evening, grabbed some groceries, and cooked dinner in the tiny kitchen. Around 10 p.m., as we were getting ready for bed, we heard a thumping noise. At first, we thought it was someone moving furniture upstairs. Maybe Lisa was rearranging her living room, but the noise continued, soft yet steady, coming from the far corner of the basement. We joked about the house being haunted, then tried to ignore it and go to sleep. The next day, we asked Lisa if she was doing any late-night cleaning or home repairs. She said no and apologized if we were disturbed by any sounds. She mentioned the basement pipes sometimes made noises. Satisfied with that explanation, we carried on with our day, visiting local museums and neighborhoods. But each night, the thumping returned. It wasn't super loud, but it was persistent. Jake finally decided to investigate. He walked around the basement apartment, pressing his ear to the walls. The sound seemed to be coming from behind a locked door near the laundry area. We assumed it was a supply closet that only Lisa could access. The door had a padlock on it, which felt a bit extreme, but we didn't think too much of it at first. On our third night, the thumping became more intense, almost like someone knocking. Jake tried to call Lisa, but she didn't pick up. We decided to message her, asking if there was any reason for those noises. No reply came that night. Unable to sleep, we stood near the locked door, listening. The hairs on my arm stood up because I could hear what sounded like a faint cough. It was so unexpected that I gasped. Jake looked at me, eyes wide. We both realized this didn't sound like pipes anymore. This sounded like a person. We backed away from the door, feeling a surge of panic. Who could be in there and why? Could it be a homeless person who broke in? A relative of Lisa who wasn't supposed to be there? Our minds raced with possibilities. Around 2 a.m., the noise stopped. We stayed huddled on the couch, too afraid to go to the bedroom in case the door opened. In the morning, we hastily packed our bags, deciding to leave. But curiosity got the best of Jake, and he said we should try to open that door. I disagreed, but he insisted on looking for any clue that might explain what was happening. We found a small metal toolbox in the laundry area. Inside was a hammer and a couple of screwdrivers. Jake managed to pry the padlock hinge loose with a screwdriver, and the lock eventually gave way. My heart pounded as he slowly pulled the door open. The smell of damp air rushed out at us. The space behind the door was a dimly lit storage room with dusty shelves and old boxes. Huddled in a corner was a man, thin and pale, wearing tattered clothes. His eyes were wide with fear, or maybe desperation. My breath caught in my throat. This stranger was shaking, and he looked terrified to see us. It was clear he hadn't had a proper meal or shower in a long time. Jake asked him who he was, but the man just mumbled, "I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to be here." We realized he might have been living in the basement, hidden away by Lisa, or perhaps he had sneaked in without her knowledge. Either way, it was terrifying. We shut the door and retreated. We didn't know if he was dangerous or simply a victim of some horrible situation. Right then, Lisa started calling my phone. I answered, feeling my heart race. She frantically told us to stay out of the locked room and leave the apartment. She said something about it being a family matter and that she was on her way over. Her voice sounded distressed, but she wouldn't explain anything. Jake and I grabbed our suitcases and hurried out. We didn't want any confrontation. As we drove away, I saw a car speeding down the street toward the house. I assumed it was Lisa. I couldn't stop shaking, replaying the moment we saw that man curled up in the dark, locked behind a door. We reported everything to Airbnb right away. They apologized and helped us find a hotel for the remainder of our stay. They promised to investigate Lisa's listing and suspend it if necessary. A few days later, a customer service agent reached out to confirm they had removed Lisa from the platform. My name is Yasir, and I come from Lahore, Pakistan. Back in 2004, my 3 friends, Ali, Imran, and Samir, and I decided to visit Las Vegas, Nevada, on a short vacation. We had always heard so much about the city, its bright lights, bustling streets, and glamorous casinos. For us, it wasn't about gambling or nightlife. We just wanted to see the famous city we had only watched in movies. We booked an Airbnb for the weekend not far from the Strip and landed in the city on a sunny Friday afternoon. Everything seemed perfect at first. The Airbnb was cozy, the streets were alive, and the people were friendly. On the first day, we roamed around, taking in the sights. We explored the iconic Bellagio fountains and the dazzling lights of Fremont Street. Everyone seemed welcoming, and we had a great time laughing, talking, and snapping photos to share with our families back home. On our second evening, after a long day of sightseeing, we decided to take it easy. Samir cooked some biryani in the Airbnb kitchen, and we all sat down to eat, reminiscing about our adventures so far. Around 9 p.m., we heard a loud knock on the door. I glanced at my friends. "Did anyone order something?" I asked. Everyone shook their heads. The knock came again, harder this time. Cautiously, I walked to the door and peeked through the peephole. A man in his 50s stood outside. He wore a dark jacket and had an intense look on his face. Something about him made me uneasy, but I opened the door slightly to see what he wanted. "Hey," he said in a gruff voice, looking past me into the room. "What are you all doing here?" I frowned. "We're just visiting. Is there a problem?" His face twisted into a sneer. "I saw you people earlier. You're Muslims, right? Terrorists." I froze. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice shaky. My friends, sensing the tension, came to the door. "Don't play dumb," the man spat. "You're all the same. You come here and act all innocent, but you're up to no good. I won't let you ruin this place." His words were laced with hatred, and my heart began to race. "We're tourists," I said firmly. "We're just here for a short trip. Please leave." But he didn't. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small knife. "I don't trust you," he growled. "You don't belong here." We quickly shut the door and locked it. Inside, we were all panicked. "Should we call the police?" Samir asked. I nodded, and Ali grabbed the phone to dial 911. Meanwhile, the man outside began banging on the door, shouting hateful slurs and threatening to break in. The minutes felt like hours as we waited for help to arrive. I kept thinking about my family back home, my parents and my younger siblings. Would I see them again? I could hear my friends trying to stay calm, but the fear in their eyes mirrored my own. Finally, we heard the sound of sirens. Relief washed over us as the police arrived. The man tried to flee, but the officers were quick. They tackled him to the ground and handcuffed him right outside our Airbnb. One of the officers knocked on our door and asked if we were okay. We explained everything that had happened, still shaken from the ordeal. The police assured us that the man would be charged for his actions. "You're safe now," one officer said. But as we stood there watching the man sitting in the back of the police car, something stirred inside me. He looked angry, sure, but also small, defeated. I turned to my friends. "What do you think we should do?" I asked quietly. Ali and Samir looked uncertain, but Imran spoke up. "Yasir, we're Muslims. What does our faith teach us?" "Forgiveness," I said almost to myself. "The Quran says that forgiveness is better than revenge." At that moment, I felt it was the right thing to do. We called the officer aside and explained our decision. "We don't want to press charges," I said. The officer looked surprised. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This man threatened your lives." "Yes," I said firmly. "We are Muslims, and our religion teaches us to forgive. We want to go back to our country with peace in our hearts. Please let him go." The officers exchanged glances but eventually agreed. They warned the man to stay away from us and released him. Before leaving, one of the officers quietly mentioned that the man's name was Henry and that he had lost his younger son in the 9/11 attacks. Consumed by grief and seeking revenge, he had lashed out at anyone he believed to be Muslim. As Henry was led out of the car, he looked at us, confused. He didn't say a word, but walked away into the night. The next day, we packed our bags and headed to the airport. As the plane took off, I looked out the window at the city below. I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a lingering unease. But I also felt proud that in the face of hatred, we had chosen compassion. My mother cried, and my father said he was proud of us for representing Islam in a positive light. That experience stayed with me, a reminder that the world can be harsh, but we have the power to respond with kindness, even to someone like Henry, who had lost so much and was desperate for revenge.